I'm Ernestina, 33 years old, and I thought I had found my fairy tale when I married Jake Wilson. We had just returned from our honeymoon in Hawaii, and I was excited for our first dinner at his parents' home. Jake always raved about his mother Diana's cooking. But that night, as everyone around me received steaming plates of premium steak and homemade dessert, my place setting remained empty. I sat in silence, stomach growling, wondering what I had done wrong. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear how this unexpected family dinner changed everything. I met Jake Wilson at a charity auction 3 years ago. I had grown up in a modest home in a small Midwest town, the daughter of a teacher and a nurse, who valued honesty and kindness above all else. That night, I was volunteering at the check-in table when Jake walked in wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his warm brown eyes crinkling when he smiled. He made a generous donation, then circled back to ask for my number. Our first date was coffee at a local cafe. One coffee turned into 3 as we talked for hours about everything from our childhood pets to our career aspirations. I worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm, and Jake had recently been promoted to senior financial analyst at his company. By our third date, I knew this was different from any relationship I'd had before. Jake was thoughtful and attentive. He remembered small details like how I preferred almond milk in my coffee, and couldn't stand the smell of lilies. Our weekend trips to nearby lakeside towns became the highlight of my month. We discovered we both loved hiking true crime podcasts and trying exotic foods. The only difference was his upbringing in affluence versus my middle-class background, but it never seemed to matter to him. After 6 months, Jake mentioned his mother for the first time in any significant way. "My mom is my biggest fan," he said, while showing me childhood photos. "She's always been there for me, especially after Dad got so busy with work. We talk almost every day." I thought it was sweet how close they were, though something in his tone hinted at an intensity I couldn't quite place. When Jake suggested I meet his family, I spent days agonizing over what to wear. I settled on a navy blue dress that was elegant without being flashy. Jake assured me they would love me, but I couldn't shake my nerves as we pulled up to the sprawling colonial-style house in the most exclusive neighborhood in town. Diana Wilson was tall and slim with perfectly highlighted hair and a string of pearls around her neck. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she extended her hand instead of offering a hug. "So this is the girl you've been spending all your time with," she said to Jake, as if I weren't standing right there. Throughout dinner, Diana asked polite but probing questions about my family, my education, and my career. Each answer seemed to disappoint her slightly, though she maintained a pleasant expression. When I mentioned my state college degree, she responded with, "How nice that those schools provide opportunities for everyone." When we left, Jake squeezed my hand. "See? That went great." But I wasn't so sure. When I mentioned Diana's comment about my education, Jake waved it away. "Mum just takes time to warm up to people. She's protective of me." 6 months later, Jake proposed during a sunset picnic. The ring had belonged to his grandmother, a delicate vintage piece that I absolutely adored. When we announced our engagement at the next family gathering, Diana's smile tightened as she examined the ring. "It's certainly different. I offered Jake my mother's ring, which is worth quite a bit more, but he insisted on Grandma's." Jake's siblings Adam and Tessa seemed genuinely happy for us, congratulating us warmly. But I noticed how they looked to Diana before expressing too much enthusiasm, as if gauging how to react. Wedding planning became a battleground. Diana had opinions on everything from the venue to the flower arrangements. "The Wilsons have always married at St. Mark's," she informed me when I suggested a garden ceremony. When I showed her the simple, elegant invitations I had designed myself, she frowned. "I took the liberty of consulting with the stationer the family has used for generations," she said, producing samples of ornate traditional designs. Jake kept telling me to let his mother help. "She lives for this stuff and she's got great taste," he said. "Plus she's paying for most of it." I gave in on some things but held firm on others, like my dress and the music. With each decision I made independently, Diana's disapproval became more apparent. Our wedding day was beautiful but stressful. Diana had insisted on inviting over 100 family friends I'd never met. During her mother of the groom speech, she spoke at length about Jake's accomplishments and their special bond, mentioning me only briefly as the woman who will be joining our family. When Jake's father, George, gave his much shorter toast, he at least acknowledged that I made Jake happier than he'd ever seen him. Our honeymoon in Hawaii was exactly the escape we needed. For 2 blissful weeks, we swam in crystal clear waters, hiked to breathtaking waterfalls, and made love in our oceanfront suite. Without family pressures, Jake was relaxed and attentive. We talked about our future, the home we would create together, and the children we hoped to have. I began to believe that maybe the wedding stress had exaggerated the issues with Diana, and things would improve once we settled into married life. The day after we returned, still jet-lagged and glowing from our trip, Jake's phone rang. "Mum wants us to come to Sunday dinner tomorrow," he said after hanging up. "The whole family will be there to hear about our trip." Despite my exhaustion, I agreed. This would be my first official family gathering as a Wilson, and I wanted it to go well. The Wilson family home looked even more impressive than I remembered. Set back from the road on 2 acres of perfectly manicured lawn, the colonial mansion had been in the family for 3 generations. As Jake pulled into the circular driveway, I smoothed my hair and checked my lipstick in the visor mirror. I had chosen a conservative floral dress that I hoped Diana would approve of. "Ready?" Jake squeezed my hand as we walked to the door. "Everyone's excited to see us." Diana opened the door before we could ring the bell. She was wearing an elegant green dress that complemented her auburn hair, which was styled in a perfect bob. "Jake!" she exclaimed, pulling him into a long embrace. When they separated, she turned to me with a considerably cooler expression. "Ernestina, that's an interesting dress choice for a family dinner." Before I could respond, Jake was whisked away by his father to discuss some investment opportunity, leaving me alone with Diana in the foyer. She gave me a tight smile. "The others are in the living room. Do try to mingle." With that, she turned and walked toward the kitchen. The living room was filled with people in expensive clothing holding crystal glasses. I recognized Jake's brother Adam and his wife Sarah and his sister Tessa with her husband Ben. The rest were a blur of cousins, aunts, and uncles whose names I struggled to recall from the wedding. "Ernestina." Tessa waved me over. She was the most welcoming of the Wilson family, though I'd noticed she rarely contradicted her mother. "How was Hawaii?" "You look so tan." I had just started describing our sunrise hike to a volcano when Diana announced that drinks were being served on the patio. The group migrated outside, conversations continuing without pause. I followed, finding myself suddenly alone as Tessa was pulled away by an elderly aunt. Jake was across the patio, deep in conversation with his father and uncle about golf. He caught my eye and winked, but didn't motion for me to join them. I stood awkwardly, clutching my untouched glass of white wine until Adam's wife Sarah took pity on me. "First family gathering as a Wilson. It's overwhelming, I know," she said kindly. "I've been married to Adam for 4 years, and sometimes I still feel like an outsider." Diana rang a small silver bell to announce dinner was ready. As everyone moved toward the dining room, I searched for Jake, hoping we would sit together. Instead, I found my namesard placed between a distant cousin and an ancient great-aunt, while Jake was seated at the opposite end near his mother. The dining room was spectacular, with a long mahogany table set with fine china and silver candlesticks. Diana stood at the head of the table, beaming. "In honor of Jake and Ernestina's return, I've prepared Jake's favorite meal, prime ribeye steaks from Montgomery Butcher's, garlic roasted potatoes, and asparagus with hollandaise." My stomach growled in anticipation. I hadn't eaten much that day, nervous about the dinner. Diana began serving, placing a plate before George first, then working her way around the table. Each person received a perfectly cooked steak, a mound of golden potatoes, and bright green asparagus, topped with yellow sauce. As Diana approached my section of the table, I straightened in my chair and smiled. She served the cousin to my left, then reached across me to serve my great-aunt on the right. Then she simply walked past me to the next person. I sat stunned, staring at my empty place setting. Had she forgotten me? Around me, everyone began eating and exclaiming over how delicious everything was. I glanced across the table at Jake, but he was engrossed in conversation with his brother. The cousin next to me noticed and frowned. "Did you not get served?" he whispered. I shook my head slightly, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. He looked like he might say something, then seemed to think better of it, and returned to his meal. I sat in silence watching everyone eat. Once or twice I caught Diana looking at me with a small, satisfied smile before turning away. I considered speaking up, raising my hand like a schoolchild to point out I had been skipped. But the thought of drawing attention to myself in this room full of Wilsons was mortifying. When everyone had finished their main course, Diana stood again. "And now for dessert. Jake's favorite apple pie with vanilla bean ice cream." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned, pushing a cart laden with pie slices, each topped with a scoop of melting ice cream. Again she made her way around the table, serving everyone with a flourish. And again she deliberately passed me by, not even making eye contact this time. Jake finally noticed. He frowned across the table at my empty place setting, then at the cart, now returning to the kitchen. He raised his eyebrows in question. Diana intercepted his look. "Oh, Jake, darling, I thought Ernestina mentioned she was on a diet. Wasn't that right, dear?" she said, turning to me with wide, innocent eyes. I felt my throat tighten. "No," I managed to say quietly. "I never said that." Diana waved her hand dismissively. "My mistake then, but it's too late now, everything's been served." She smiled brightly at the table. "Isn't this pie divine? I picked the apples myself from the orchard upstate." Jake looked confused but didn't challenge his mother. He took a bite of pie and the conversation moved on, leaving me sitting with an empty stomach and a growing sense of humiliation. I watched as everyone around the table savoured Diana's homemade apple pie. The smell of cinnamon and warm pastry filled the air, making my empty stomach clench painfully. Jake was frowning slightly now, his eyes moving between my empty place setting and his mother's satisfied expression. Adam, who was seated closer to me than Jake, leaned over and quietly pushed his dessert plate toward me. "Here, have mine. I'm full anyway," he whispered. Before I could respond, Diana's sharp voice cut across the table. "Adam, what are you doing?" Her eyes flashed with disapproval. Adam straightened in his chair. "Just offering Ernestina some dessert, Mom. She doesn't seem to have gotten any." Diana's lips thinned. "How thoughtful. But I'm sure if Ernestina wanted something, she could simply ask." She turned her gaze to me, challenging. Every eye at the table was now on me. My face burned with embarrassment. To speak up now would confirm I was the outsider who didn't understand the Wilson family dynamics. To stay silent would be to accept Diana's treatment. I felt trapped. Jake finally intervened. "Mum, why didn't Ernestina get dinner or dessert?" Diana laughed lightly. "Oh, darling, I explained already. I thought she was watching her figure. Many brides let themselves go after the honeymoon." She looked me up and down with a critical eye. I saw something shift in Jake's expression, then a brief flash of doubt. Was he actually considering his mother's explanation? The thought that he might believe I'd refuse food without saying anything hurt more than Diana's slight. "I never said I was on a diet," I repeated louder this time, my voice steadier than I felt. Diana sighed dramatically. "Well, there seems to be some confusion. Let's move to the living room for coffee, shall we? I've been dying to show everyone the new family photos." As everyone migrated to the living room, Jake made his way to my side. "What happened back there?" he asked, his voice low. "Your mother deliberately didn't serve me," I whispered back. "Both dinner and dessert." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "That doesn't make sense. Why would she do that?" "Because she doesn't want me here," I said. The words felt both terrible and freeing to say aloud. Jake looked pained. "You're being paranoid. Mum loves hosting. She wouldn't exclude you on purpose." In the living room, Diana was already holding court, a large photo album open on her lap. "Here we are at the lake house last summer before Jake met Ernestina. Such a perfect family day." She turned the page. "And this is from Christmas. All the real Wilsons together." The emphasis on real wasn't lost on me. I sat stiffly on the edge of a leather armchair, while Jake perched on the arm, his body language increasingly tense. As Diana continued narrating family memories that pointedly excluded me, I noticed Jake becoming more withdrawn. His usual animated responses to family stories were replaced with tight smiles and short nods. He was finally seeing what I had observed from the beginning. The drive home was silent at first. I stared out the passenger window, watching suburban mansions give way to city apartments. My stomach growled audibly in the quiet car. "I'm sorry you didn't get to eat," Jake finally said. "We can stop somewhere if you want." "That's what you're sorry about, not the fact that your mother deliberately humiliated me in front of your entire family." Jake sighed. "I don't think she did it on purpose. Mum can be absent-minded when she's hosting so many people." "Absent-minded?" She looked me in the eye when she skipped me, twice. Then she lied about me being on a diet. "Maybe she genuinely misunderstood something you said." Jake's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Mum has always been welcoming to everyone. She's just protective of me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jake, she's been cold to me from the moment we met. She criticized my dress tonight the second I walked in. She referred to your family photos as including all the real Wilsons. How can you not see what's happening?" "You're overreacting," Jake snapped. "Mum is the most important woman in my life. She raised me by herself while Dad worked constantly. You need to try harder to connect with her." His words hit me like a slap. "The most important woman in your life, I'm your wife, Jake." The argument escalated as we arrived home. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Jake accused me of being overly sensitive and looking for problems. I accused him of being blind to his mother's manipulation. By midnight, Jake had grabbed a pillow and blanket and headed for the couch, leaving me alone in our bed tears soaking the pillow. I lay awake, wondering how our perfect honeymoon bubble had burst so completely in a single evening. Was this what marriage to Jake would be like? Always coming second to Diana, always having my experiences dismissed. When morning came, Jake was already in the kitchen making coffee, acting as if nothing had happened. "Want some breakfast?" he asked cheerfully. "I can make those blueberry pancakes you like." I stared at him, exhausted and confused by this sudden shift. "Jake, we need to talk about last night." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, pouring batter onto the griddle. "Family dinners can be stressful. Next time will be better." As I watched him flip pancakes and hum to himself, I made a silent decision. If Jake wouldn't stand up for me, I would have to stand up for myself. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged that confirmed my worst fears. Each time we attended a Wilson family gathering, Diana found new subtle ways to exclude me. Sunday brunch at the country club, Diana forgot to include me in the reservation count, leaving me standing awkwardly while the hostess scrambled to add a chair to the already crowded table. Family game night teams were chosen for charades, and somehow I was designated scorekeeper instead of player. "Someone has to keep track," Diana said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tessa's birthday celebration. Diana handed out champagne to toast her daughter, but skipped my glass. When I reached for the bottle to serve myself, she whisked it away to the kitchen, claiming it needed to be kept chilled. The final straw was when the photographer Diana hired for a Wilson family portrait suggested poses that conveniently placed me on the edge, easy to crop out later. Diana nodded approvingly at each suggestion. I began documenting these incidents in a journal, partly to reassure myself I wasn't imagining things, and partly because I knew eventually I would need evidence to convince Jake. The pages filled quickly with detailed accounts of Diana's tactics and Jake's obliviousness. At home, tension simmered beneath the surface of our once happy relationship. Jake spent more time at work, coming home late with excuses about client meetings. I threw myself into freelance design projects, building my portfolio and my financial independence just in case. We still had good moments. Jake could be the attentive, loving man I had married when we were alone, and Diana wasn't mentioned. We took weekend drives to the coast, walked in the park on Sunday mornings, and occasionally rediscovered our honeymoon passion. But those moments became islands in a widening sea of unspoken resentment. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Jake mentioned his mother's upcoming 60th birthday celebration. "It's going to be at the Grand Hotel downtown. Black tie. Mum's been planning it for months." I set down my moisturizer and met his eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Will I need to bring my own food, or will there be a server specifically assigned to skip my place setting?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Jake's expression hardened. "That's not fair. Mum's putting a lot of effort into this party. She specifically told me she wants you there." "Did she, though? Because the invitation that came in the mail was addressed only to you." Jake looked surprised. "What? No, it was for both of us." I went to my dresser and pulled out the heavy cream envelope with Jake Wilson written in elegant calligraphy. No Aunt Ernestina or Ann Guest, just Jake. He stared at it for a long moment. "It's just an oversight." "It's deliberate, Jake, like everything she does to make me feel unwelcome." I took a deep breath. "I've been keeping track." I handed him my journal. "Read it, please." Jake flipped through the pages, his frown deepening. "You've been writing down every little thing my mother does. That's obsessive, Ernestina. Is it obsessive to notice when someone consistently treats you like you're invisible? Read it, Jake. Really read it." He sat on the edge of the bed, reluctantly beginning to read. I watched his expression change from dismissive to confused to troubled as he turned page after page. Finally, he closed the journal and looked up at me. "Some of this could be explained by other things," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "All of it, every single incident." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I'll talk to her before the birthday party. Make sure she understands you're my wife and deserves respect." I wanted to believe him, but Diana had been manipulating Jake his entire life. One conversation wouldn't change that. Still, it was the first time he'd acknowledged there might be a problem, and that was progress. The night of Diana's birthday party, I dressed carefully in a black gown that was elegant, without being flashy. I wanted to look like I belonged in the Wilson world, even if Diana thought otherwise. Jake complimented me sincerely, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hope the evening might go well. The Grand Hotel ballroom was decorated with tasteful floral arrangements and twinkling lights. At least 50 guests milled about in formal wear, many of whom I recognized from our wedding. Diana held court near the entrance, resplendent, in a midnight blue gown and diamond jewelry. When she saw Jake, her face lit up with genuine joy. "My wonderful son," she exclaimed, embracing him tightly. Her expression cooled noticeably when she turned to me. "Ernestina, that dress is certainly bold." I smiled brightly. "Happy birthday, Diana. You look beautiful." I handed her the carefully wrapped gift we had brought, a vintage brooch Jake had helped me select. Diana accepted it with a brief nod and immediately handed it to a server. "Please put this with the others," she instructed, before turning back to greet another guest. I watched as the other gifts were carefully arranged on a display table, while ours was placed in a box underneath. Throughout the cocktail hour, Diana made a point of introducing Jake to important friends and business associates, while I stood awkwardly beside him, never acknowledged or included in the conversations. I sipped my champagne and reminded myself that I was here for Jake, not Diana. When dinner was announced, Jake and I found our place cards at a table far from Diana's. I was actually relieved until I realized I was seated between two elderly gentlemen who were hard of hearing, effectively isolating me from any meaningful conversation. Diana stood to make a speech before the meal, thanking everyone for coming and highlighting special guests. And of course my beloved children Adam and Tessa, and my precious son Jake, who has always been my greatest joy. No mention of her children's spouses, I noticed, so at least the slight wasn't directed only at me. The servers began delivering the first course, a delicate lobster bisque. Each guest received their portion with a flourish, the soup poured from silver tureens at the table. When the server reached me, Diana appeared suddenly at his elbow. "Ernestina has seafood allergies," she said firmly. "No soup for her." I stared at her in shock. "I don't have any food allergies, Diana." Diana's smile was brittle. "Better safe than sorry, dear. We wouldn't want an incident at my birthday dinner." She patted my shoulder and moved away before I could protest further. Jake, seated across the table, frowned in confusion, but was pulled into conversation by his table mate before he could question what had happened. The pattern continued through each course. For the salad, Diana informed the server I didn't care for balsamic. For the main course, she claimed I had mentioned being vegetarian, though the menu had been pre-selected with no alternatives offered. By dessert time, a towering chocolate cake with raspberry filling, I was sitting with an empty stomach and simmering anger. As the cake was served, Diana made her way to our table, champagne flute in hand. She greeted each guest warmly, accepting birthday wishes with gracious smiles. When she reached my chair, she leaned down as if to embrace me. Instead, she accidentally tipped her champagne glass, sending the golden liquid cascading down the front of my black dress. I gasped at the cold sensation and the immediate stickiness. "Oh my goodness!" Diana exclaimed loud enough for nearby tables to turn and stare. "How clumsy of me! Someone get a napkin for Ernestina." As servers rushed over with napkins, Diana leaned close to my ear, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "You don't belong here. You never will." In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't about me at all. This was about Diana's need for control over Jake, her inability to accept any woman in his life. Previous girlfriends had probably been driven away by similar tactics, but I wasn't going anywhere without a fight. I stood up slowly, napkins clutched to my champagne-soaked bodice. The nearby conversations hushed as people turned to watch the drama unfold. Diana took a step back, a look of manufactured concern on her face. "Everyone," I said, my voice clear and carrying across the suddenly quiet section of the ballroom. "I'd like to make a toast to Diana on her birthday." Diana's eyes widened in alarm. She hadn't expected me to speak up, certainly not to draw attention to myself. I raised my water glass. "To Diana Wilson, a woman who has perfected the art of serving everyone but me." The silence deepened. Jake half rose from his chair, his expression a mix of horror and confusion. "For those of you who don't know me well, I'm Ernestina, Jake's wife of 3 months. Since joining this family, I've been systematically excluded from every gathering. Tonight alone, I've been denied every course of this lovely dinner based on allergies and preferences I don't have." I gestured to my empty place setting. This follows a pattern that began at our first family dinner after our honeymoon, where Diana served steaks and desserts to everyone except me. Diana's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "Ernestina, you're making a scene. This isn't appropriate." "What isn't appropriate, Diana, is treating your son's wife like she's invisible. What isn't appropriate is whispering to me that I don't belong here." I kept my voice calm and dignified despite the trembling in my hands. I love Jake with all my heart, and I had hoped to become part of this family. But it's clear to me now that some people are invested in making sure that never happens. I set down my glass and looked directly at Jake. His face was frozen in shock. Then I turned and walked steadily toward the exit, head held high despite the champagne stains spreading down my dress and the eyes of 50 guests following my departure. I had reached the ornate doors of the ballroom when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned half expecting to see Diana coming to deliver more whispered barbs. Instead, it was Jake, his face pale and his tie askew as if he'd been pulling at it. "Ernestina, wait." He caught up to me in the hotel lobby. "What you said in there, is it true?" "All of it." I looked at him tiredly. "Read the journal, Jake. Look at my empty plate tonight. Ask yourself why your mother would tell the servers I have allergies I don't have. But to say it publicly in front of everyone, because nothing else has worked, I've tried being patient. I've tried talking to you privately. You've dismissed every concern." My voice broke slightly. "I'm your wife, Jake. Doesn't that mean anything?" Jake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his response to extreme stress. "Of course it does, but she's my mother. And you have to choose," I said softly. "Not between us as people, but between enabling her behavior or standing up for what's right." We stood looking at each other in the opulent hotel lobby, the sounds of the party continuing behind us. A chasm seemed to have opened between us, wider than the physical space we occupied. "I need to think," Jake finally said. "This is a lot to process." I nodded, suddenly exhausted. "I'm going home. You should stay for your mother's birthday." I turned toward the hotel entrance. "Ernestina," Jake called after me. When I looked back, his face was troubled. "I do love you." "I know," I said. "But sometimes love isn't enough." The taxi ride home was a blur of city lights and quiet tears. I paid the driver and walked up to our apartment feeling like a stranger in my own life. Everything looked the same: the grey sectional sofa where Jake and I watched movies, the framed photos from our honeymoon, the kitchen where we cooked Sunday breakfast together. But nothing felt the same. I changed out of my ruined dress and took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the sticky residue of champagne and the emotional exhaustion of the evening. When I finally emerged, wrapped in my bathrobe, with my hair in a towel, the apartment was still empty. Jake hadn't followed me home. That night, I slept fitfully, waking several times thinking I heard the front door. But morning came, and I was still alone. Jake had texted only once: "Staying at a hotel, need time to think." No mention of what happened, no acknowledgement of my feelings or experiences. The next day passed in a strange limbo. I called in sick to work, unable to face creative meetings when my personal life was imploding. I alternated between anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief that everything was finally out in the open. No more pretending, no more gaslighting, no more silent suffering. By the third day, I realized I needed support. I called my parents, who lived 2 states away, and finally told them everything. They had met Diana only briefly at the wedding and had commented afterward on her chilly demeanor, but I had downplayed it, not wanting them to worry. "Oh, honey," my mother said when I finished recounting the birthday party incident. "You did the right thing standing up for yourself, but marriages take work and compromise. Give Jake time to process." My father was less diplomatic. "If he can't see how his mother is treating you, maybe you're better off without him." Their differing perspectives reminded me that there was no simple answer, no clear right or wrong path forward. After hanging up, I called my closest friend Melanie, who came over immediately with ice cream and wine. "You should have called me sooner," she admonished, pouring generous glasses of Cabernet. "No one should deal with a monster-in-law alone." Melanie's support gave me the courage to start looking beyond my immediate pain. I found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and booked an appointment. I also discovered an online support group for people with difficult in-laws, where stories similar to mine made me feel less alone. Some had found ways to establish boundaries and maintain their marriages. Others had ultimately divorced. All emphasized the importance of self-care and clear communication. A week after Diana's birthday party, with still only minimal contact from Jake, I received a surprising text from his sister Tessa. "Can we meet for coffee, just us?" We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe far from the Wilson family's usual haunts. Tessa arrived looking nervous, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. She hugged me awkwardly before sitting down. "I want to apologize," she began after our drinks arrived. "I've watched how my mother treated you, and I said nothing, did nothing." I stirred my latte slowly. "Why didn't you?" Tessa sighed heavily. "Because that's how it's always been. Mom decides who's acceptable in our lives and we fall in line. She looked down at her hands. It wasn't just you. There was Beth before you and Cassandra before her. Jake's ex-girlfriends. Tessa nodded. Beth lasted almost 2 years. They were getting serious. Then Mum started the same routine, excluding her from family events, making comments, turning every gathering into a test Beth was designed to fail. She took a shaky breath. Eventually, Beth gave Jake an ultimatum. He chose Mum like he always does. I felt a chill despite the cafe's warmth. And Cassandra. Similar story. 3 months of Mum's tactics and she was gone. Tessa reached across the table to touch my hand. But you're different. You married him, and you stood up to Mum publicly, which no one has ever done. Fat lot of good it did me, I said bitterly. Jake's been gone for a week. He's staying with Adam and Sarah, Tessa revealed. And he's miserable. Adam says he's hardly sleeping, just pacing and looking at old photos of you two. A small flame of hope flickered inside me. Has he talked about what happened? Not much to Adam, but Dad called Jake yesterday. Tessa lowered her voice. Dad's always been passive about Mom's behaviour, letting her run everything. But I overheard him tell Jake that he was making the same mistake Dad had made his whole marriage, choosing peace with Mum over what's right. This was unexpected. George Wilson had always seemed like a silent, acquiescent presence in Diana's orbit. The thought that he might recognise the dysfunction and regret his role in it was oddly comforting. Tessa and I talked for nearly 2 hours. She shared stories of Diana's controlling behaviour throughout their childhood, how she had sabotaged Tessa's college boyfriend because he was too intellectual and might take Tessa too far from home, how she had undermined Adam's confidence until he chose a career in the family business rather than pursuing his dream of becoming a chef. We all cope differently, Tessa explained. I became the perfect daughter, never causing waves. Adam threw himself into making Dad proud to compensate for Mom's criticism. And Jake became Mom's emotional partner, the son who could do no wrong as long as he prioritised her above everyone else. As we parted, Tessa hugged me tightly. I'm on your side, Ernestina, whatever happens, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say so. Okay. That evening, as I was heating up leftover pasta for dinner, I heard a key in the lock. Jake entered slowly, as if unsure of his welcome. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled. Hi, he said simply. Hi, I replied, my heart pounding. He set down a small duffel bag. Can we talk? We moved to the living room, sitting at opposite ends of the sofa, the distance between us symbolic of the emotional gulf that had formed. I'm sorry, Jake began, for not believing you, for not seeing what was happening, for leaving when you needed me to stay. He ran a hand through his dishevelled hair. I've been doing a lot of thinking this week, and talking, to Adam, to Dad, even to a therapist Adam recommended. I remained silent, waiting. My whole life I've been taught that keeping Mum happy was my responsibility. When Dad was always working, it was Jake's job to make Mum smile. His voice cracked slightly. I became so used to interpreting the world through her eyes that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Couldn't hear what you were telling me. Your father called you. I asked, thinking of what Tessa had shared. Jake looked surprised. How did you know? Tessa and I had coffee today. She mentioned it. Jake nodded slowly. Dad said something that hit me hard. He said he spent 40 years making the wrong choice, and watching me repeat his mistake was like seeing his life's biggest regret play out again. Jake's eyes filled with tears. He told me not to wait until I'm his age to realize what matters most. I felt my own eyes stinging. And what does matter most, Jake? You do. He reached hesitantly for my hand. You're my wife, my partner, the woman I want to build a life with. And I failed you. His grip tightened. But if you'll let me, I want to make it right. We talked deep into the night, really talked perhaps for the first time since the honeymoon. Jake admitted that he'd seen signs of his mother's behaviour, but had been conditioned to excuse it. I acknowledged that my silence had allowed the situation to escalate. We both recognised that healing our marriage would require ongoing work and clear boundaries. What happens next time we see your mother? I asked, as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. Jake's expression turned serious. I'm going to tell her that her behaviour toward you is unacceptable, that if she wants me in her life, she needs to respect my wife. And if she can't do that, we'll need to distance ourselves until she can. She won't take that well, I warned. Probably not, Jake agreed. But for the first time in my life, I'm ready to stand up to her. Not out of anger, but out of love. For you, for myself, and even for her. This pattern isn't healthy for anyone, including Mom. As Jake and I fell asleep in each other's arms that morning, I knew we had a difficult road ahead. But for the first time since Diana's birthday party, I felt hope. Not just for our marriage, but for Jake's journey toward becoming his own person, separate from his mother's expectations and manipulations. The real test, though, would be the next family gathering. And with Thanksgiving just weeks away, we wouldn't have to wait long. In the days that followed Jake's return, we focused on rebuilding our connection. Morning coffee on the balcony became our time to check in with each other, sharing thoughts and feelings without the distractions of work or family. Weekend hikes in the nearby state park gave us space to talk about bigger issues, including strategies for handling Diana. Jake kept his word and called his mother to establish clear boundaries. I sat beside him during the call, holding his hand as Diana cycled through tears, accusations, and finally cold silence. "Mom, I love you," Jake said firmly. "But I love Ernestina too, and she's my wife. The way you've treated her is unacceptable, and it needs to stop." Diana's voice was so loud I could hear it without speakerphone. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me, by choosing that woman over your own mother." Jake took a deep breath. "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone else. I'm asking you to respect my marriage. She turned you against me at my own birthday party." "No, Mom, your behavior turned me against you. Ernestina simply had the courage to point it out." The conversation ended with Diana delivering an ultimatum. "If you continue with this nonsense, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. I won't have my holiday ruined by her presence." Jake didn't hesitate. "Then we won't be there. I hope you'll reconsider, but that's your choice to make." After he hung up, Jake looked simultaneously drained and relieved. "That's the first time I've ever really stood up to her," he said wonderingly. The aftermath of Jake's stand was swift. Diana called each family member, spinning a narrative of betrayal and ingratitude. Some believed her completely, including Jake's Aunt Patricia and several cousins who sent disapproving texts. Others were more skeptical, having witnessed Diana's behavior firsthand. Tessa called immediately after hearing from Diana. "Mom's on the warpath," she warned. "She's telling everyone you've abandoned the family and I'm a traitor for taking your side." Adam was more circumspect, reaching out to Jake directly. "I don't want to get in the middle of this," he said. "But Sarah and I have talked and we think Mum was wrong in how she treated Ernestina. We're still coming to Thanksgiving though. Someone has to keep an eye on the situation." With Thanksgiving approaching and our invitation to the Wilson family gathering officially rescinded, Jake and I faced a decision. "We could go to your parents," Jake suggested. "They've been asking us to visit." The thought was tempting. My parents would welcome us warmly, no passive-aggressive comments or empty place settings. But running away felt like letting Diana win. "What if we host our own Thanksgiving?" I proposed instead. "Invite both our families plus some friends. Show Diana that she doesn't control the narrative anymore." Jake looked uncertain. "Mom would see it as a direct challenge." "It is," I admitted. "But not out of spite. Out of a desire to create our own traditions, our own family circle that includes everyone who supports us." After some discussion, we decided to move forward with our plan. We sent invitations to my parents, Jake's siblings and their spouses, a few close friends, and yes, Diana and George, though we didn't expect them to accept. Diana's response was predictably hostile. She called Jake in a fury, accusing us of trying to steal her holiday and divide the family. Jake remained calm but firm. "The invitation stands if you change your mind, Mom. We'd love to have you there." Okay. To our surprise, George called the next day. "Your mother's upset," he said gruffly. "But I want you to know I think you're doing the right thing, standing up for yourselves, making your own traditions." There was a pause. "I'd like to come to your Thanksgiving, son, if that's all right." Jake was stunned. "Of course it's all right, Dad. But what about Mum?" "Your mother makes her own choices," George said, "and it's time I made mine." As Thanksgiving approached, our guest list solidified. My parents would drive in from Ohio. Tessa and Ben confirmed they would join us instead of going to Diana's. Adam and Sarah decided to split the day, having early dinner with Diana before coming to our place for dessert. 3 of our closest friends accepted as well, and George would come alone, the first major family event he would attend without Diana in over 40 years. I threw myself into preparations, wanting our first hosted holiday to be perfect. Jake took care of the turkey and wine selection while I planned side dishes and decorations. We rearranged our apartment to accommodate a rented dining table that would seat 12. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Diana made her countermove. She announced an extravagant dinner at the country club scheduled at the exact same time as our gathering. She personally called each family member who had accepted our invitation, pressuring them to change their plans. Tessa held firm despite Diana's tears. Adam compromised with his early dinner plan, but George simply told Diana, "I'll be at Jake and Ernestina's for Thanksgiving. You're welcome to join me there." Thanksgiving Day arrived crisp and sunny. My parents came early to help with preparations, my father and Jake bonding over turkey basting techniques en masse, while my mother and I prepared side dishes. Tessa and Ben arrived next, bringing homemade cranberry sauce and a nervous energy that dissipated as they were warmly welcomed into our home. The apartment filled with delicious smells and laughter. George arrived looking uncomfortable in a suit and tie, but relaxed as Jake handed him a scotch and introduced him to my parents. They soon discovered a shared interest in fishing and were deep in conversation when the doorbell rang again. I opened the door to find Adam and Sarah, who weren't expected until much later. "Change of plans," Adam said with a sheepish smile. "Mum was difficult. We decided we'd rather be here for the whole meal." By the time we sat down to dinner, our table was full except for one empty chair we had set for Diana just in case. The turkey was perfectly golden, the sides abundant, and the conversation flowed easily between our families and friends. George, seated at the opposite end of the table from Jake, seemed to be enjoying himself, laughing at my father's jokes and complimenting my mother's sweet potato casserole. Midway through the meal, during a lull in conversation, George cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something," he announced, raising his glass. "To Jake and Ernestina, thank you for bringing us together today. In 40 years of marriage, I've let someone else dictate what our family should look like. Today, I'm seeing what it could have been all along, welcoming, warm and full of genuine love." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm proud of you both." There were tears in Jake's eyes as he returned the toast. "To new traditions and real family," he said, squeezing my hand under the table. Just as we were serving dessert, the doorbell rang again. Jake and I exchanged glances, both of us thinking the same thing. He went to answer it while I prepared myself for whatever was about to happen. Diana Wilson stood in our doorway, impeccably dressed, but with red-rimmed eyes. "The country club was empty," she said quietly. "Everyone cancelled." Jake took a step back. "Would you like to join us? We saved you a place." Diana hesitated, looking past Jake to where everyone was gathered around our table, laughing and passing pie plates. George noticed her and stood uncertainty on his face. For a moment, I thought Diana would turn and leave. Her expression cycled through hurt anger and something that looked almost like fear. Then her shoulders slumped slightly. "If you're sure I'm welcome." Jake looked at me, the question clear in his eyes. I nodded. This was a first step, however small, and I was willing to meet it with grace. Diana entered our home cautiously, like a visitor to a foreign land. George pulled out the empty chair beside him, and everyone shifted to make space. There was an awkward moment of silence before my mother, bless her, launched into a story about her first disastrous attempt at Thanksgiving turkey, and the tension eased. Diana barely spoke during dessert, but she ate the pumpkin pie I had made and nodded when asked if she wanted coffee. It wasn't a miraculous transformation or a tearful reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement, however reluctant, that things had changed. As guests began to depart later that evening, Diana approached me in the kitchen, where I was packing leftover containers for everyone to take home. We were alone for the first time since her birthday party. "This was a lovely meal," she said stiffly. "The turkey was perfectly cooked." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Jake did most of the work on that. Diana twisted her wedding ring, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from her before. I don't find it easy to share Jake's attention. I never have. It wasn't an apology, but it was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I handed her a container of leftover stuffing. "I'm not trying to take him away from you, Diana. I'm just asking for my place in his life to be respected." She accepted the container with a nod. "This will take time for me." "I understand," I said. And strangely, I did. Diana had built her identity around being the most important woman in her son's life. Adjusting to a new reality wouldn't happen overnight. "We have time." As Diana and George left, Jake put his arm around my waist. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" "It was a start," I conceded. "A small one." My parents were staying in our guest room, and as we all settled in for the night, my mother pulled me aside. "You've handled a difficult situation with grace," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm proud of you." That night, lying beside Jake in the quiet of our bedroom, I reflected on how much had changed in the week since Diana's birthday party. Our marriage had been tested and had emerged stronger. Jake had found his voice against his mother's manipulation. And perhaps most surprisingly, Diana had taken a tiny step toward accepting the new family dynamics. The holidays weren't going to be instantly perfect. Diana wasn't going to transform into a warm, loving mother-in-law overnight. But for the first time, I could see a path forward that didn't require me to erase myself or Jake to choose between the women in his life. As I drifted off to sleep, I sent a silent thank you to the younger me who had found the courage to stand up at that birthday dinner. Sometimes breaking the silence is the only way to begin healing. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing seasons came gradual shifts in our family dynamics. Jake and I continued our morning coffee ritual, checking in with each other and reinforcing our commitment to maintaining healthy boundaries. We attended couples therapy twice a month, learning communication strategies and processing our individual family histories. Diana's journey toward acceptance moved in fits and starts. Some days brought small gestures of inclusion, like actually addressing cards to both of us, or asking about my work during family phone calls. Other times, she reverted to her old patterns, making passive-aggressive comments, or attempting to monopolize Jake's attention at gatherings. The difference now was that these behaviors no longer went unchallenged. Jake would quietly but firmly redirect conversations when his mother became inappropriate. I had developed the confidence to address slights directly in the moment with calm dignity rather than accumulated resentment. George surprised everyone by becoming my unexpected ally. He began calling me separately from family calls, asking genuinely interested questions about my graphic design work, and sharing stories about Jake's childhood that Diana had always controlled the telling of. She wasn't always this way, he told me during one such call. After Jake was born, something changed. She became fiercely protective, almost obsessive about being the perfect mother. I worked long hours and traveled for business, so I told myself her intensity was making up for my absence. He sighed heavily. I should have seen how unhealthy it was becoming. These conversations helped me understand Diana better, though understanding didn't excuse her behavior. It did, however, make it easier to respond with compassion rather than anger. Tessa and I grew closer, meeting regularly for coffee or yoga classes. She introduced me to several of her friends, expanding my social circle beyond the Wilson family orbit. Adam and Sarah invited us for dinner at their home once a month, creating a safe space for family connection without Diana's overwhelming presence. Jake flourished under these new dynamics. Released from the constant pressure of managing his mother's emotions, he became more relaxed and present in our marriage. He received a promotion at work, took up photography as a hobby, and started talking about our future in concrete terms rather than vague some days. In late April, we received unexpected news that changed everything. After feeling unwell for several weeks, I took a pregnancy test that confirmed what I had begun to suspect: we were expecting a baby. The blue plus sign on the plastic stick sent us into a whirlwind of emotions: joy, anxiety, excitement, and uncertainty. I'm going to be a dad. Jake kept saying, his expression a mix of wonder and terror. He placed his hand gently on my still flat stomach. We're going to be parents. The reality of bringing a child into our complex family situation sobered us quickly. We both wanted our baby to have loving relationships with all their grandparents, including Diana. But we also needed to ensure that the patterns of manipulation and control didn't extend to the next generation. We need to talk to Diana before we announce this to everyone else, Jake said as we lay in bed discussing our options. Give her time to process it privately. I agreed, though the thought of sharing such intimate news with Diana before even telling my own parents felt strange. Maybe we should invite both your parents over. Your dad has been so supportive. He deserves to hear it at the same time. We arranged a dinner at our apartment the following weekend. I prepared a simple meal, nothing that would compete with Diana's cooking, but comfortable and welcoming. Jake seemed unusually nervous, checking and rechecking the table setting, adjusting the lighting, selecting and reselecting background music. It's going to be fine, I reassured him, though I felt my own anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. Whatever her reaction, we'll handle it together. George arrived first, bringing a bottle of expensive wine and a potted orchid. For your collection, he said, handing me the plant. I had mentioned my newfound interest in houseplants during one of our calls, and the fact that he remembered touched me deeply. Diana arrived precisely on time, immaculately dressed as always. She brought no gift, but offered a stiff compliment on our recently repainted living room. Progress of a sort. Dinner went smoothly with George, carrying much of the conversation, talking about a recent fishing trip and asking about our work. Diana was quieter than usual, but polite, asking for recipes and commenting on how well the flavors complemented each other. By dessert time, Jake was bouncing his leg nervously under the table, our planned announcement moment approaching. As I served coffee and a simple berry crumble, Jake cleared his throat. "Mom, Dad, we invited you over tonight because we have some news we wanted to share with you first." He reached for my hand across the table. "Ernestina and I are expecting a baby." "You're going to be grandparents in November." George's face broke into a wide grin. "That's wonderful news. Congratulations to you both." He stood to embrace Jake, then surprised me with a warm hug of his own. Diana sat motionless, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Her expression was unreadable eyes fixed on some middle distance beyond us all. The silence stretched uncomfortably until George prompted gently, "Diana, did you hear what Jake said?" She set her cup down carefully. "I heard." Her voice was flat. "I'm just surprised you didn't tell me sooner. Mothers usually know these things about their sons." Jake tensed beside me. "We just confirmed it ourselves last week, Mom. You're the first people we've told." Diana's gaze finally moved to me, dropping briefly to my midsection before returning to my face. "How far along are you?" "About 9 weeks," I answered. "Still very early, which is why we're only telling family for now." Something flickered in Diana's eyes, pain perhaps, or fear. Then she did something completely unexpected. She stood, walked around the table, and placed her hand lightly on my shoulder. "Congratulations," she said, her voice slightly strained but sincere. "A baby is always a blessing." Later, after Diana and George had left Jake, and I sat in stunned silence on the couch. "That was not what I expected," I finally said. Jake nodded, equally surprised. "Mom loves babies, always has, but I thought she'd be more territorial, make it about her somehow. Maybe becoming a grandmother is giving her a new role to focus on," I suggested. "One that doesn't compete with being your mother." The following weeks proved my theory partially correct. Diana threw herself into grandmother preparation with characteristic intensity. She sent links to articles on prenatal health, dropped off bags of pregnancy books, and began knitting what she announced would be the most beautiful baby blanket ever created. Some of her old controlling tendencies emerged in new forms: strong opinions about names, insistence on a particular stroller brand, unsolicited advice about everything from prenatal vitamins to nursery colours. But these were easier to manage than her previous hostility. Jake and I developed a system of acknowledging her input while clearly stating our own preferences. "Thanks for the suggestion, Mom. We'll consider it when we make our decision," became Jake's standard response. It acknowledged her without committing to her direction. As my pregnancy progressed and my body changed, I found myself in the strange position of having Diana actually notice and attend to me for the first time. She would insist I take the most comfortable chair at family gatherings, ask about my symptoms, and once even brought me ginger tea when I mentioned morning sickness. "She's not doing it for you," Tessa observed during one of our coffee meetups, now chamomile tea for me. "She's doing it for the baby, but at least it's an improvement." By my second trimester, we had settled into an uneasy truce with Diana. She was included in appropriate pregnancy milestones, hearing the heartbeat, learning the gender, a girl helping with registry selections, but always within clear boundaries. Jake remained vigilant against any attempts to dominate the experience, reminding his mother gently but firmly when she overstepped. The true turning point came unexpectedly in my 7th month. Diana had organised what she called a small family baby shower at her home, which turned out to include 30 guests, elaborate decorations, and a professional photographer. I was uncomfortable with the spotlight, but recognised it as Diana's attempt to be involved in a positive way. During the gift opening, Diana presented us with a large, beautifully wrapped package. Inside was a completely restored antique cradle. "This was Jake's," she explained, her voice unusually soft. "And his father's before him. 4 generations of Wilsons have slept in this cradle. I've had it refinished and had new bedding made." The cradle was beautiful solid oak with delicate hand-carved details, but it was Diana's next words that truly moved me. "Ernestina, I want you to have this for your daughter," she said, looking directly at me. "Our family's next generation." It was the first time Diana had ever referred to me as part of our family, without qualification or hesitation. It was the first time she had acknowledged that the baby was my daughter as much as Jake's. And it was offered not as a way to insert herself or claim territory, but as a genuine passing of a family tradition. I felt tears welling in my eyes, pregnancy hormones amplifying my emotional response. "Thank you, Diana. It's beautiful, and knowing it has such history makes it even more special." Diana nodded, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "I thought we might go shopping next week for some nursery items to complement it, if you're feeling up to it." Jake squeezed my hand, his expression reflecting my own surprise and cautious hope. "That sounds nice, Mom. Ernestina has been wanting to look at rocking chairs." That shopping trip became the first of several outings where Diana and I interacted not as adversaries or even as reluctant in-laws, but as two women preparing to welcome a new life who would connect us forever. We didn't become best friends overnight, and there were still moments of tension when Diana's controlling nature surfaced. But there was also laughter, shared excitement, and the beginnings of mutual respect. As my due date approached, Jake and I discussed having Diana present at the hospital when the baby was born. Not in the delivery room, I clarified quickly, but maybe in the waiting room with your dad and my parents. Jake looked thoughtful. A year ago, I would have said absolutely not. She would have made the whole experience about her. He smiled and placed his hand on my now prominent belly, feeling our daughter kick. But now I think it might actually be okay. She's really trying, Ernestina. She is, I agreed. And this baby deserves to know all her grandparents, including the complicated ones. When our daughter Eliza Grace Wilson arrived on a crisp November morning after 18 hours of labor, Jake was by my side throughout, his support unwavering. My parents had flown in a week earlier and were the first to meet their granddaughter in the recovery room, followed by George and Diana. I will never forget the look on Diana's face when Jake placed Eliza in her arms for the first time. All her carefully maintained composure crumbled as she gazed down at the tiny face wrapped in a hospital blanket. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks. "She's perfect," Diana whispered gently, touching Eliza's tiny fingers. "She looks just like Jake did." Then she looked up at me with genuine warmth. "Thank you for making me a grandmother." In that moment, with exhaustion and joy mingling in my veins, I realized we had all traveled a long, difficult path to reach this point. Diana's journey from exclusion to acceptance. Jake's growth from conflict avoidance to healthy boundary setting. My own evolution from silent suffering to confident self-advocacy. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been necessary. Eliza's first birthday party was held in our backyard. The November chill kept at bay by patio heaters and the warmth of family gathered together. I watched from the deck as Diana helped my daughter toddle across the grass toward Jake, who was crouched with open arms and an encouraging smile. My parents chatted comfortably with George by the cake table, while Tessa and Adam supervised their own children on the small play structure we had recently installed. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Sarah holding 2 cups of hot cider, one of which she offered to me. I accepted the warm drink gratefully, just reflecting on how far we've all come in 2 years. Sarah nodded, following my gaze to where Diana was now clapping as Eliza reached Jake's arms. "It's pretty remarkable. I never thought I'd see the day when family gatherings didn't feel like walking through a minefield." "It's not perfect," I acknowledged. "Diana still has her moments." "Of course she does. People don't completely change their basic nature. But the difference is now everyone recognizes it and doesn't let it dominate the family dynamic." Sarah bumped my shoulder gently with hers. "You started that, that night at her birthday dinner. You broke the pattern that had controlled this family for decades." I had never thought of it quite that way. In the moment, standing up to Diana had felt like a personal act of self-preservation, not the catalyst for family-wide change. Diana looked up then and caught me watching her. 2 years ago, such a moment would have triggered a cold stare or a dismissive turn away. Today she smiled and gestured for me to join them on the lawn. Eliza was attempting to stand independently, tiny hands releasing Jake's fingers for seconds at a time before grabbing them again for security. As I crossed the grass to my family, I reflected on the lessons of the past 2 years. I had learned the power of speaking truth with dignity rather than suffering in silence. I had discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. I had come to understand that people's hurtful behavior often stems from their own insecurities and fears, not from anything lacking in those they hurt. Most importantly, I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing yourself to be mistreated again. It means releasing the bitterness that can poison your own heart while maintaining the boundaries that protect it. Diana hadn't been transformed into a completely different person. She still had strong opinions, still occasionally made comments that stung, still struggled with sharing Jake's attention. But she was making a genuine effort to respect our marriage and to build a relationship with me based on our shared love for Jake and Eliza, rather than competition for them. I reached the little group just as Eliza took her first truly independent step, wobbling precariously before plopping down on the grass with a surprised expression. We all cheered as if she'd run a marathon. "Did you see that?" Diana exclaimed, her face alight with grandmotherly pride. "She's going to be walking everywhere before we know it." "Just like her mother," Jake said, wrapping an arm around my waist. Always ready to stand on her own 2 feet. Diana caught the reference and had the grace to look momentarily abashed before nodding in acknowledgement. A valuable trait to inherit, she said, meeting my eyes directly. One I've come to respect. Later, as guests began to depart and Eliza napped upstairs after the excitement, Diana helped me clear plates from the patio tables. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before she spoke. I want to tell you something, Ernestina. Her voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. Something I should have said long ago. Come. I set down the stack of plates I was holding, giving her my full attention. When you first came into Jake's life, I saw you as a threat. Someone taking my son away from me. Diana's fingers twisted her napkin nervously. My own mother-in-law treated me terribly when I married George. Made me feel like an outsider unworthy of her precious son. I swore I would never be like her. She laughed humorlessly. And then I became exactly what I hated, perpetuating the same cycle with you. I was stunned by this admission. In 2 years of gradual improvement, Diana had never directly acknowledged her behavior toward me at the beginning of my relationship with Jake. That night at my birthday dinner, when you stood up and spoke the truth about how I had treated you. Diana paused, swallowing hard. It was humiliating, but it was also a wake-up call I desperately needed. You did what I never had the courage to do with my own mother-in-law. I didn't do it to humiliate you, I said softly. I know that now. You did it because nothing else had worked, because I had left you no other option. Diana placed her hand tentatively on mine. I'm sorry, Ernestina, truly sorry for how I treated you, for the dinners where I deliberately excluded you, for making you feel unwelcome in this family. The apology I had once thought would never come was being offered freely without prompting or pressure. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Diana. That means a lot to me. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, she continued. I know trust has to be earned over time, not granted in a single moment, but I want you to know that I see you now, not as a rival or an intruder, but as the woman who makes my son happy and who gave me my beautiful granddaughter. I do forgive you, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Not because what happened wasn't painful, but because holding on to that pain doesn't serve any of us, especially Eliza. Diana nodded, blinking rapidly. I want to do better, be better, for all of us. She glanced toward the house where Jake was visible through the window cleaning up the kitchen. He chose well when he chose you. I see that now. That evening, after all the guests had left and Eliza was tucked into her crib, the one that had replaced the antique cradle she had outgrown Jake, and I sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a shared blanket against the November chill. Mom told me what she said to you, Jake set his arm warm around my shoulders, about being sorry for how she treated you in the beginning. It was unexpected, I admitted, but nice to hear after all this time. Jake was quiet for a moment, the swing creaking gently beneath us. You know, when you stood up at Mom's birthday dinner 2 years ago, I was terrified. I thought you were ending our marriage, drawing a line I couldn't cross. I was afraid of that too, I confessed, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I'm glad you didn't. Jake pulled me closer against the cool evening air. That moment changed everything. It forced me to see what I had been ignoring, to make choices I had been avoiding my whole life. He kissed the top of my head. You saved us, Ernestina, all of us, even Mom. As we rocked gently under the stars, I thought about the journey from that first family dinner where I sat with an empty plate to today's joyful birthday celebration. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been setbacks and difficult conversations, tears and frustration. But there had also been growth, forgiveness, and the creation of something new and healthier for the next generation. I thought of all the women who might be watching this video right now, sitting in silence at family gatherings where they felt excluded or unwelcome. Women swallowing their hurt to keep the peace, doubting their own perceptions as I once had. If I could speak directly to them, I would say this: your feelings matter. Your place at the table matters. And sometimes breaking the silence is the bravest, most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone trapped in unhealthy patterns that no one has had the courage to name. I leaned my head against Jake's shoulder, listening to the distant sound of Eliza's white noise machine through the baby monitor, and the gentle rhythm of my husband's breathing beside me. The family we had created wasn't perfect, but it was real and honest and growing stronger every day. What are you thinking about? Jake asked, breaking the comfortable silence. I smiled in the darkness. I'm thinking that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead us exactly where we need to be. I hope this story has resonated with you in some way. If you've experienced similar family dynamics, or if you're currently navigating challenging relationships with in-laws, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, belonging is something you claim, not something given to you by others.